One of the more common Bigfoot sighting reports in this part of Arizona, this what they would call a Mongolian monster, it's Arizona's version of Bigfoot, is the creature seems to be a little bit lighter by estimates than Pacific Northwest Bigfoot, the Rocky Mountain Bigfoot. People estimate heavier weights. But still, when someone describes something 7 feet tall and 400 pounds, that's just gigantic. Another thing that's most common is there's a lot more of the light brown colors in the sightings here, and people say that the face is less ape-like. It's more of a troll-like look. A lot of people describe it with bumps all over its face. We're checking out a Bigfoot sighting that happened inside the Mongolian Rim in the Tonto Creek area, taking a look around for Bigfoot evidence since people are seeing them here. We're gonna take some photos, we're gonna film some of the areas we look for Bigfoot evidence, and we're gonna tell you about some of the Bigfoot sighting reports that come out of here. Tonto Creek, Arizona, Mongolian Rim.
This reclusive creature is described as being at least 7 feet tall, hairless in the face, bumpy, scabby face with a long troll-like nose, and it's otherwise covered with a long, thick coat of light brown or camel or even reddish brown hair. He travels with a wide, inhuman stride, sometimes leaving footprints measuring 20 inches in length. Often reports of the elusive beast involve a piercing, sometimes deafening scream or howl, unlike any other wildlife in the area. People that have crossed paths with the beast often describe an eerie silence prior to their encounter, an appreciable stillness in the woods that commonly surrounds predatory animals. Even more common are reports of a strong, very foul stench, which has been described as that of a skunk, dead fish, bad body odor, or even a dead animal smell.
Jenny could smell something dead, and we found these couple of deer carcasses right here.
Actually,
there's also older bones back there too.
Yeah, there is. This is a whole pile of dead animals. Look at down there.
Yeah, it's like a kill site, dumping ground.
It's either a dumping ground.
Most sightings of the Mongolian monster occur in and around the Rim Country. The elusive giant is reported from Prescott up to Williams, east over to Winslow, and down to Heber, but most sightings occur in the vicinity of Payson near the rim's edge. It was near Payson where the creature was spotted by cryptozoologist Don Davis, whose run-in is generally accepted as the first documented encounter with the Mongolian monster. David said he witnessed the tall, hairy beast during a Boy Scout trip. This is one of the first documented sightings from the Mongolian Rim. It was reported by Don Davis. He lived from 1932 to 2002. This Bigfoot sighting prompted him to become a cryptozoologist and seriously search for Bigfoot the rest of his life in the Tonto National Forest, Mongolian area of Arizona. I hope you enjoyed this report. I would like to pay a tribute to Don Davis. Thank you so much for your contribution to cryptozoology and making Bigfoot a popular conversation item in this part of Arizona. Don Davis writes, in the summers of 1944, 45, and 46, I attended 10-day session at a Boy Scout summer camp in Arizona. I was 12, 13, and 14, respectively, in those years. Late in each 10-day session, the scouts divided up into troops of maybe 25 boys or so, an adult scoutmaster, and went on an overnight hike of maybe 15 miles round trip. The summer scout camp was located about 20 miles from Payson. It was in a ponderosa pine forest just under the rim. Tonto Creek flowed through the camp. In 1945, he joined the group in an overnight hike into the Tonto Creek, some miles downstream from the scout camp. It was an area not often visited. The U.S. Weather Bureau had an automatic weather recording device that was needed in service. So we went in there to exchange recording papers. The area was a little harder to get into than most hiking destinations.
We're hiking along the Tonto River because of the Bigfoot sightings here. And there's been a Bigfoot sighting report to come out of here not too long ago. So, great water source. The Bigfoot are here. Hopefully they're leaving footprints. And of course we're always hoping for the lottery of Bigfoot, that they actually show themselves while we're in a given area.
The last few miles of the hike they passed along Tonto Creek. The Boy Scouts were spread out over an eighth of a mile from the guy in the front and the guy in the rear. They had never been to this campsite before, but they knew it was going to be easy to find because the trail led right up to the weather reporting apparatus. Don Davis writes, "Another boy and I decided to race all the rest of the scouts and each other to see who would get to the campsite first. We began to run along the trail, passing everyone in front of us. We didn't know how many were in front of us, so we just kept running along the trail, passing others and each other in a bid to be first. As we rounded a large tree that grew near the trail, the other boy, who was just ahead of me, came to a dead stop. I tried to get past him. He held me back as he stared down the trail. The trail headed more or less straight past a couple of clearings to the left and to the creek to the right. The big tree and the boy in front of me kept me from having a really good view of what was ahead, but I could make out a reddish-brown figure coming up the embankment from the creek onto the trail with a strange sort of rocking motion. The figure stopped on the trail in sort of a left profile to us and partially turned its body with a quick, strange kind of jerk and looked down the trail towards us. At this moment, I was able to break past the other boy, who screamed at me to stop, and he started running back down the trail. The brown and reddish figure ahead of me I thought was a scout. He was about 100 yards ahead. I got past the other boy, and it stepped into the woods and was lost to sight. Since this scout, which I thought it was 100 yards ahead of me, I ran pretty hard, still pacing myself, thinking I needed to get past him. Anyway, I ran about another 100 yards. What I didn't realize at the time was it's very hard to judge distances in the woods. All you can go by is the perceived length or height of a known object. Trees, rocks, bushes don't help. I judged the distance to be 100 yards based on the height of what I thought was a Boy Scout. I was surprised when I was only halfway there. I had last seen the scout, and I began to run out of steam. When I finally got up to where the scout had entered the woods, I was really winded. I noted that the scout had missed the trail and gone off into the woods a bit in the wrong direction. This gave me added incentive, as I thought I would have an advantage over him by keeping on the trail that he had missed. I continued running along the trail. It was not far after that I reached the camp area and found out that I was the only one there. A little while later, the rest of the group started to arrive. They seemed relieved to see me, and several asked if I was all right. When the boy that I was racing arrived, he was the last one. He asked me about what I had saw on the trail. He argued with me that it wasn't a Boy Scout. I told him that it looked like one to me, and besides, what else could it have been? He didn't know, but he said he would prove to me tomorrow that it couldn't have been a scout. It seems he had expressed some fear for my safety to the other scouts, as they'd caught up with him on the trail. But later, when I was questioned and didn't seem to be aware of anything unusual, the rest of the group lost interest in what the other boy was reporting. We made camp, stretching out our sleeping bags and setting up packs and gear and putting them in place. It was getting late in the afternoon. Some of the boys brought fishing gear and went down along the creek to catch some of the trout. I was always fond of fishing along Tonto Creek. But my surprise, this time a few fish were caught. A couple of the boys came back saying they heard something or someone in the brush near them while they were fishing. But when they called out, they got no answer. One boy said he ran into the brush to see what was there, but all he saw was the brush moving where someone had left in a hurry. One boy came back mad. He claimed that some of his fish were stolen by possibly one of the boys. He questioned everyone as they came back from fishing, and pretty soon pinned down the last boy to come in. But when that boy arrived, he didn't have a fish either. The boy that lost his fish had gone away from his pole and went into the bushes for a few moments, and when he came back, the fish were gone. But his very nice fishing pole and all his fishing gear had not been touched. It seemed really strange to all of us. Most of the scouts felt that the boy was making it up about catching fish at all. The scoutmaster decided that there must be something weird going on, that maybe a weird individual is hanging out. A couple of the boys saw a figure on the trail. People are now hearing someone moving around in the bushes. Fish are being stolen. So he cautioned all of us to stay back at camp together. Whoever might be out there was very much outnumbered, and so we would all stick together. The next day, while crossing a high divide on the way back to the main scout summer camp, we came upon an old, grizzled prospector. He had his donkey and equipment, a perfect model for a crazed individual. That evening, after supper, we sat around the campfire late into the evening, telling ghost stories. At one point I thought I saw movement out in the darkness, but decided it was my imagination being influenced by the ghost story. It was really late when we broke up and got into our sleeping bags. We had laid them out in more or less a straight lineup, away from the campfire. When I got into my bag, I discovered that there were some very hard tree roots poking up through the ground and into my back. I moved my bag several times, but everywhere I moved it, more tree roots. I finally gave up, picked up my bag, and carried it down past the campfire area looking for a decent spot. I finally found a spot in the middle of a soft dirt path. It was far side of the campfire area near the weather reporting station. The path was very soft and dirty. I ran between two areas of the bushes. It was something like sleeping between two rows of hedges about 3 feet high. One of these rows screened my vision from the campfire area. I had been awake 16 hours and hiked 10 miles with a full pack and sleeping bag. It was only a few moments until I dozed off. A little while later, I heard someone fussing around the campfire area. I could hear him rustling in the silverware, as if looking for something. This lasted a little while, then stopped. I fell back asleep. Then it happened again. The noises woke me again. I figured someone else had come looking for something he had needed. It lasted a while, then stopped. Back to sleep I went. Then it commenced again. This time it went on for some time. I could almost sleep in spite of it, but it kept waking me up. Finally I spoke out and told him to quit making so much noise and go to bed. Then the noises stopped for a little while. Then a little while later, it started again. I started awakening to the noises coming from the campfire area. As it wasn't a steady noise, just the rattle of silverware or metal utensils from time to time. I found myself alternating between waking and sleeping in small doses. I was really tired and not really getting any sleep. Finally, I heard footsteps coming along the path towards me from the direction of the campfire. The steps rounded the bushes on the path where I was lying and stopped at the foot of my sleeping bag. I peeked out and saw what I thought must be the scoutmaster standing there, except for he seemed much taller. And I thought, maybe because I was laying down on my back, he looked taller. There was a bright moon that night. It was to the right and a bit higher than the head of what I thought was the scoutmaster. In the moonlight, I could see hair sticking out from the sleeves of his jacket. I was surprised that he was wearing one of these big lumberjack-type jackets with hair fibers protruding from it. But it had been one of those jackets because, bunched up around the neck, it was very bulky. Still, it was strange he was wearing it now, as I had not seen him wear it before, and this summer night wasn't very cold. Very strange to me. He just stood there silently at the foot of my sleeping bag, not even moving. The bright moonlight hindered my vision a little bit, but he must have been able to see me very well. I sat up in my sleeping bag. adjusting my position to put myself in the shadow so I could get a better look at the creature. After a moment I could see better, and what I saw gave me the shock of my life. There, standing less than 4 feet away from me, was a monster-like man. Please note that I did not say man-like monster. The creature was huge. Its eyes were deep set and hard to see. They seemed expressionless. His face seemed pretty much devoid of hair, but there seemed to be hair along the sides of his face. His chest, shoulders, and arms were massive, especially the upper arms, easily upwards of 6 inches in diameter, perhaps much more. I could see pretty well all of his hair, but didn't observe really how thick the body hair was. The face head was very square, square-side, squared-up chin like a box. Whenever I see a reconstruction of the skull of Gigantopithecus, I seem struck by the similar shape of the sides and the bottom. To me, this night apparition looked like the half-monster men that sometimes appeared in the American comics in the 1930s. They were massive and somewhat man-like in shape and body structure, but with a touch of dumb, heartless beast in the features. For just a second or so I sat there, my eyes about even with the creature's knees, looking up into the face of this monster. Then I fell back into my sleeping bag, pulled it over my head, and crunched down, scared to death. I didn't scream. I didn't try to run or call for help. If this thing were real, none of that would work anyway. But it couldn't be real. There was no such thing as what I had been looking at. Hunched down in the bag, I listened intently for what my visitor would do next. I heard nothing for a little while. Then I heard it slightly shuffle its feet. And then I heard it crash crunch just above my head and on my right side, the side away from the campfire area. This was followed by a series of several footsteps moving away from me in the direction from my sleeping bag. Then I heard nothing more. The next thing I remember was waking up to the noise around the campfire area. It was morning, and I could hear footsteps coming along the path from the campfire just like in the middle of the night. The steps stopped at the foot of my sleeping bag. I slowly pulled the bag down and looked. The scoutmaster was standing there. I realized later he had been following footprints that led him to me. "What did you see?" he asked, noticing my relieved expression. "I didn't see nothing," I replied in a matter-of-fact manner using very poor grammar. Looking past my head, he gave a startled look and said, "What is that?" I turned and looked. Just beyond my bag, a bush on the right side of the path had been squashed. The main trunk of the bush was a couple inches thick, and the bush had been several feet high. Now it was lying against the ground, the trunks splintered. The scoutmaster, noting the surprise on my face, must have believed me when I told him I had seen nothing. He must have figured I had slept through whatever had happened. He said to me, "Get up and get packed. We are leaving right away." I was the last one up. When I got around to the campfire area, I found out why we were leaving without having breakfast. There wasn't any food. Everything edible had been eaten. Breakfast and lunch for 20 boys or so, including a whole box of dry pancake flour. Everyone's mess gear, all the cooking gear, and the remnants of the food packages had been gone through and scattered all over the place. Never did find all of my equipment. At first all the other boys blamed me for the mess, as I was the only one that had slept apart from the others. But they soon realized I couldn't have eaten everything, especially the dry pancake flour. So we all figured it must have been the crazy guy in the woods. On the hike out, when I came to the clearing area where I had seen the reddish-brown figure the day before, I found the scout that I had been racing sitting in the sand below the trail near the creek. At that point, there was a yard or so from the edge of the creek to the drop-off. It gradually sloped down 10 or 12 feet to the edge of the creek. There in the sand, approximately where we had first seen the figure the day before, were prints. They looked a lot like what rain boots would leave in the very soft mud, several inches deep, with a ridge thrown up around the impression. My friend that I had raced pointed out to the tracks and said that is proof that what we saw that day was not a scout. I answered that I did not see why it could not have been, and I stepped into one of the tracks. And then I stepped into another one, and I saw that the tracks turned around going in the other direction. My friend then said to me, "Okay, how are you going to step into that one?" pointing to the next track that was about twice as far away as my stride could take me. I took an extra step in the sand, leaving almost no mark, and then stepping into the indicated track. At that point in time, the boy got very upset with me, telling me to stop stepping in all the tracks. I was ruining them. It didn't register with me. And then the scoutmaster came along. He was taking up the rear. The boy was very upset and almost crying, and he asked the scoutmaster what had made the tracks. The scoutmaster said he didn't know, and comforted him a little bit. Don Davis, who passed away suddenly in February of 2002, we will miss him and his contributions to Sasquatch research. I hope you enjoyed this Bigfoot sighting report. We love going into these areas and showing you where the report happened. This Mogollon Rim is just a mecca for Bigfoot sightings. Don Davis, his sighting when he was a 13-year-old Boy Scout, this turned him into a Bigfoot enthusiast, and he searched for Bigfoot and studied Bigfoot sighting reports in the Mogollon Rim area the rest of his life. I enjoy going to these places and taking a look around, so I just love to bring you guys along and show you what's behind these reports. Not only this report, but there are dozens and dozens of reports in this area, and a lot of people describe a similar creature, a lighter colored, troll-like looking face. The 7-foot tall Bigfoot, a lot of people generally say they're about 400 pounds. When you get to the Pacific Northwest or the Rocky Mountains and you see a Bigfoot that's about 7 foot, people are saying, 5 to 800 pounds. So I believe the ones up north are a little bit girthier and heavier than the Mogollon Rim Bigfoots. I hope you guys enjoyed. Keep on watching. We're going to keep on squatching.